Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and get straight to the insights.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're plunging into a topic that sparked a lot of conversation and maybe a fair bit of frustration, too, in fiction, the girl bossing trope.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
We're going to explore its common characteristics and really try to unpack why, from one perspective anyway, it might actually undermine the very empowerment it seems to be aiming for.
Right. It's kind of counterintuitive sometimes.
Our journey today is guided by a specific source, a YouTube video from the Cake channel titled 5 Things That Make Your Girl Bossing Characters Really Not Good.
Ian Cake. They have some pretty sharp takes on this.
They really do.
Yeah.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the behaviors, the narrative choices often tied to these girl bossing characters.
And figure out why they might weaken the power they're supposed to show, according to this critique.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. So to kick us off, when we talk about girl bossing characters in fiction, what are the immediate hallmarks Cake identifies? Like, what do they look like on the page, typically?
Well, at its core, the source describes a female lead who is almost always overpowered, OP.
Yeah, OP, got it.
And strikingly, nearly everyone in the story, good guys, bad guys, they either just adore her or, well, they just bow down to her.
Everyone. Really?
Pretty much. And it gets kind of specific, actually. Cake points out this recurring, pretty unsettling thing where the bad guys are often shown as wanting to sexually exploit her. The source suggests this is often just a narrative shortcut.
A shortcut how?
To make the villain seem worse, basically, rather than actually adding any depth or complexity to the protagonist herself.
I see. So it's more about painting the villain than building the hero.
Exactly. And beyond that, there's this strong steamrolling aspect.
Rolling.
Yeah, this character frequently just barrels over everyone else's opinions, their agency in the story. And the source doesn't mince words. They often describe her personality as garbage.
Wow. Okay. Garbage. That's blunt.
It is. But it highlights a frustration with this trope, which is pretty popular almost everywhere in a lot of recent fiction. The critique really digs into why that can be a problem.
Okay. That garbage personality claim is something. To really illustrate this, I guess degradation of the trope, Cake points to a specific author, someone who, in their view, kind of shows this evolution pretty starkly. Can you walk us through that? I'm curious how that shift looks.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, maybe a bit disheartening example. The source highlights Jenna Morici's work.
Okay.
In her earlier book, Eve the Awakening, the character Eve is incredibly powerful, the strongest chimera, I think.
Right.
But here's the key difference, according to the source. Eve still needed help. She needed to rely on other people.
Ah, okay. Not totally self-sufficient.
Exactly. She couldn't do everything alone, and she definitely didn't just steamroll everyone. So this interdependence, Cake argues, makes her not a problematic girl boss.
So she had power, but also vulnerability connection.
Right. Now contrast that with Maurice's later book, The Savior's Sister, featuring Lila.
Okay, Lila.
Layla is presented as the absolute embodiment of the girl boss archetype that Cake is critiquing.
How so?
She steamrolls everything she wants. The source calls her a total psychopath with, and this is a direct quote, no value in human life whatsoever.
Whoa.
And yeah, the source explicitly says everyone wants to be with her sex.
So just a complete reversal from Eve.
It's a really stark evolution, yeah. Within the same author's work, it shows a big shift in how the character is portrayed, and you could argue it dilutes what true power looks like in a story.
That's a powerful distinction, isn't it? Lila is the pitfall, Eve is maybe a more nuanced way. It seems the core issue is how strength is actually portrayed.
Yeah.
So, Cake identifies 5 core reasons why these girl bossing characters, despite the label, often fall short. Let's dig into the first one. The idea that simply being bossy doesn't actually empower you.
Right.
This sounds like it ties right back to that steamrolling thing you mentioned.
It absolutely does. The source points out how the girl boss character typically just makes demands of everyone.
And people just go along with it.
Often, yeah, with maybe some initial token resistance, but then they quickly give in. And frequently, this obedience, it isn't earned through respect or real influence. It happens just because, well, the plot says so.
Plot convenience.
Exactly. It's a narrative shortcut. The main argument here is that just ordering people around, acting like a dictator, it doesn't make a character seem strong or empowered.
It makes them seem
selfish, usually, uncaring, maybe even childish. And what's really frustrating, the source notes, is when authors tell you this character is good or powerful. But their actions, like killing without a second thought or putting down everyone around them, or never ever apologizing when they're clearly wrong.
Yeah.
Those actions completely contradict what you're being told.
Yeah.
This telling versus showing gap makes the reader feel like the author is kind of lying.
I get that. It pulls you out, makes you distrust the narrative.
Exactly. It undermines the character's credibility and, honestly, your investment in the whole story. It makes you, the listener, question if you can trust what you're reading.
That's a really strong critique of characters who just rely on like brute force and unearned authority. So if being bossy isn't empowerment, what about when everyone just submits? That's the second point, right? How does that undermine things?
Yeah, it's a direct follow-on. The source goes into detail about how characters in these stories often submit to the girl boss without any convincing internal reason. Pretty much just because the plot says so. Kirkpatrick calls it plot armor. And this kind of shallow, unexplained compliance, it doesn't make the main character seem powerful. It just makes the whole story feel kind of hollow, unearned. As a listener, you're sitting there thinking, why did they just roll over like that?
It lags weight.
Totally. The source then contrasts this sharply with, more powerful, more meaningful kinds of submission.
Like what?
Well, think about submission that comes from genuine love or duty or deep respect or maybe a sense of responsibility or even a really well-established, maybe unconventional but believable relationship.
Okay, so reasons that make sense for the characters involved.
Exactly. Those reasons give depth and meaning to the character's influence and how others react to her. It makes her impact feel significant, earned, not just like a narrative convenience.
That makes perfect sense. It's about the why behind the obedience, not just the what. And it feels like a common thread here is authenticity, maybe?
I think so.
Does that carry over into how these characters see themselves? Like the whole I don't need anybody thing. That's point 3, isn't it?
Yeah.
How does that undermine strength?
Precisely. Girl boss characters very often adopt this I don't need anyone stance. They prove their self-sufficiency by just consistently overpowering everyone else and tackling every single challenge completely alone.
Right, the lone wolf.
Yeah. And again, the source circles back to that Eve and Lila comparison to really hammer this home.
How so?
Eve, in Eve the Awakening, even with all her power, she had to rely on her friend. To achieve her goals, even just to survive the climax of the story, her strength was actually defined through her ability to work with others and through her vulnerabilities.
Okay.
Lila, on the other hand, in The Savior's Sister, can literally do everything herself. She just steamrolls all the obstacles, always gets exactly what she wants, no sweat.
Doesn't sound very challenging.
Well, no. And the source argues that I don't need anybody isn't actually a powerful statement in storytelling. True power, real strength, it's often found in things like self-sacrifice, or in the courage it takes to admit you're weak, or the humility to rely on others when things get tough. It really emphasizes the value of teamwork and shared struggle over just isolated, unchallenged dominance. It makes you, the listener, feel more connected, maybe, more human.
That's a great insight into what makes characters really stick with you. Now, the fourth point gets pretty direct. Purposefully denigrating every male character so you look better is pathetic.
Ooh, yeah.
How does the source elaborate on this one? I feel like I've seen this in different media and it always feels, well, flat.
It does feel flat, and Kirkpatrick really digs into why. This critique highlights how male characters in these girl bossing stories often get stripped of, like, all positive qualities.
In what way?
They're frequently just shown as useless or creepy or purely evil or maybe just undeveloped love interests with no real personality.
So props, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. No positive traits, no growth, no arc of their own. It just flattens the entire world around the protagonist.
And the argument is?
The source argues that deliberately making all the male characters physically, emotionally, or skillfully weaker doesn't actually make the female character look stronger.
It does the opposite.
Kind of, yeah. It makes her look like she needs to tear others down just to seem competent herself, which, suggests insecurity, not genuine power or capability.
Right. It backfires.
It really does. And the source draws a clear parallel here, saying it's just as obnoxious to read, quote, caustic and malicious writing that's hatred towards men as it is to read fiction that does the same thing to women.
Okay, so it's about negative portrayal across the board being a weak narrative choice.
Exactly. They cite Grady Hendrix's The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires as an example of the latter, critiquing how women were depicted there. It really brings up a big question for all of us, doesn't it? What does true strength in a character actually look like when it's not just propped up by making everyone else look bad?
That's a question that really gets to the heart of meaningful character development. And our fifth and final point takes this critique into some, well, pretty sobering territory. Not valuing human life does not empower you.
Yeah, this one's heavy.
What's the common thread Kirkpatrick identifies here?
The source points out this disturbing, recurring theme, especially with younger girl bossing characters, just a complete disregard for human life.
Like how?
They murder without thinking about it, without reflection. They don't consider the profound implications for themselves, for others, for their own soul, maybe.
Kill and move on.
Yeah, they might massacre people, make messages out of blood, and then literally never think about it again. It's presented almost like a shortcut to being badass.
Wow. Just consequence-free violence.
Pretty much.
Oh, yeah.
The video uses this really powerful example from the video game Yakuza 0.
Oh, yeah. How does that connect?
Well, in that game, characters who haven't taken a life understand that crossing that line, taking a life, it's this profound act. It stains your soul. It fundamentally changes you as a person.
So it emphasizes the weight of it.
Exactly. It highlights the huge moral weight, the trauma involved, which makes the character's choices way more compelling when they do face that situation.
Right.
So the argument is that just throwing in merciless murder, gore, violence that doesn't automatically make a character cool or badass.
It's just empty.
It can be, yeah. Ignoring the trauma and the moral weight of taking a life is just a shortcut to badassery that ultimately makes characters feel shallow, maybe uninterested.
So what's the alternative?
Having a moral code, even if it's a complex one, even one that maybe allows for dehumanizing certain enemies, but acknowledging wrongdoing, facing internal conflict about it, that provides so much more interesting insight and complexity.
Than just nothing.
Than just a total lack of a moral compass, yeah.
Yeah.
It's about earning that badass label through real consequences and struggle, not just through flashy, empty actions.
This has been a really, really insightful deep dive into this girl bossing trope. It sounds like the big picture critique is that this portrayal often just feels artificial, angry, and crucially, it lacks genuine complexity.
Yeah, that sums it up well. It's a fascinating look at what happens when a concept that's maybe meant to empower kind of goes wrong in the execution.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, what does it tell us?
Well, I think what we're seeing here is really a deeper reflection on character development itself.
Oh, so?
The source, Kirk Pattycake, consistently seems to favor narratives that are centered more on hope, maybe on healing, on characters who overcome challenges by acknowledging their weaknesses or by relying on others.
As opposed to
stories driven purely by anger or negativity or just nihilism. The source finds those ultimately less compelling and ironically maybe less empowering in the long run. It really makes you, the listener, think about what makes a character truly resonate with. Is it just their raw power and their ability to steamroll everyone? Or is it their humanity, their struggles, their connections, their flaws?
And that leaves us with a provocative thought for you to consider as you encounter more stories out there.
Mm-hmm.
Does true empowerment in a character come from just steamrolling others, getting everything they want without effort, often hurting people along the way? Or does it come from overcoming real challenges, admitting flaws, navigating tricky moral landscape?
And maybe, crucially, relying on others and earning that respect.
Exactly. It's something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the girl bossing trope.
Thanks for having me.
We hope it's given you some fresh perspectives on how we think about powerful characters in fiction, and maybe even a new lens for your next read or watch.